After the devastating flood that cleansed the earth of all evil, Noah, God's chosen patriarch, found himself in a renewed and silent world. The ark, which had floated on the murky waters, finally rested on the mountains of Ararat, and life began to flourish again. The birds sang, the vegetation sprouted, and hope was reborn. In the midst of this new era, Noah decided to plant a vineyard, a symbol of prosperity and new beginnings. He dedicated himself to the land, watering the seedlings and taking care of each leaf that appeared, believing that fruitfulness would bring joy and unity to his family. However, the peace he sought would not last. After a day of hard work, Noah gave in to the temptation of the wine he produced. Drunkenness wrapped around him like a cloak, and he fell asleep in his tent, vulnerable and exposed. What could be seen as a fragile moment of humanity would become the catalyst for a family tragedy. Ham, Noah's youngest son, entered the tent and came across the scene. What could have been an act of compassion and care turned into mockery and disrespect. Instead of looking away and protecting his father's dignity, Ham chose to expose his nakedness, laughing and telling Shem and Japheth, his brothers, what he had found. Shem and Japheth, unlike Ham, acted with respect and reverence. They took a cloak and, with their backs turned, entered the tent to cover their father. The atmosphere at that moment was tense, marked by the choice of each of the brothers. One chose mockery, while the others chose honor. The scene that unfolded brought to light the central dilemma of the story: respect for the father figure and the consequences of our actions. When Noah awoke, confusion and shame overwhelmed him. Upon learning what had happened, his heart was filled with sadness and indignation. The curse he placed on Canaan, the son of Ham, echoed with a deep weight, foreshadowing a cycle of servitude and dishonor that would extend for generations. There, in the heart of that tent, what began as a human failure and a moment of vulnerability turned into a legacy of division and conflict. Ham, who had been a witness to the new creation, was now marked by his choice. What did he feel? Probably a mixture of pride and shame, an internal conflict that would consume him. He did not imagine that his action would have such profound repercussions, not only for himself, but for his son and his descendants. The expectation of a bright future was replaced by a burden he could not bear alone, and curiosity about what the next day would bring turned to dread. Thus, the narrative unfolds in a fertile field of emotions and decisions, where each character is shaped by their choices. Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth represent different facets of humanity, each dealing with their weaknesses and virtues. What is at stake is more than a simple family episode. It is about the eternal dilemma of respect, honor, and the consequences that our actions can have on the lives of others. The story of Ham and Noah, then, is not just an ancient narrative, but a mirror reflecting timeless dilemmas that still resonate across generations. The sun slowly rose above the horizon, illuminating the newly renewed land. Noah, with his hands covered in dirt, watched his vines grow with hope. There was something almost sacred about seeing the little green leaves stretch toward the light. Each one of them is a new life, I thought, while feeling a deep satisfaction at starting over. He turned to his children, who were helping tend the plantation. Sem, always more thoughtful, examined the seedlings with an attentive eye, while Japh seemed more optimistic, laughing and playing with the small birds that fluttered around. Ham, on the other hand, seemed distant. His gaze wandered, lost in thoughts that didn't fit into that new reality. The relationship between Ham and Noah was no longer the same. What was once admiration and respect now felt like a minefield of resentment and uncertainty. "Father, shouldn't you teach us to take care of the land too?" asked Ham, with a tone of disguised disdain. Noah stopped, feeling the weight of criticism in his son's words. "Ham, we all have responsibilities here. We must work together if we want to prosper," Noah replied, trying to remain calm, but frustration was beginning to bubble. Meanwhile, Shem and Japheth exchanged complicit glances, noticing the growing tension. "Ham, what do you mean by that?" asked Shem, trying to steer the conversation towards a more constructive path. "It's just that sometimes it seems like you've forgotten who the real leader is here, Dad," Ham retorted, his voice carrying a challenge that echoed in the air. The words cut like blades, and Noah felt the cold of disloyalty. "I am the leader of this family and always will be," Noah declared, the firmness in his voice reflecting the pain he felt. "But that doesn't mean I shouldn't listen to all of you. We can't divide ourselves at a time like this." The silence that followed was heavy, everyone immersed in their thoughts. Ham, in particular, was struggling with a whirlwind of emotions. "Why can't I be heard? Why are my ideas never valued?" he thought as he watched his father, who seemed increasingly distant. The desire to assert himself, to be recognized, grew within him like a shadow. "Maybe I need to do something to get noticed," he muttered to himself. In the following days, the routine continued, but the tension hovered like a heavy cloud. Noah, determined to maintain harmony, organized a family dinner. "Today, we're going to celebrate what we have," he announced as he prepared the table. The smell of warm bread and freshly produced wine filled the air, creating a festive atmosphere. Shem and Japheth helped serve, but Ham remained silent, his frustration building. During dinner, the conversation revolved around trivial matters, but the atmosphere was far from light. "The harvests are better than I expected," Shem said, trying to break the tension. "Yes, but we need to prepare for winter," Noah replied. "We can't let our guard down." Japh, ever the optimist, added, "And we can make more wines, maybe even a new type of drink." But Ham, in his silent rebellion, decided to add more fuel to the fire. "What if we do something different? Why not try something new instead of just following what you say, Dad?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded with meaning. Shem and Japheth exchanged worried looks, but Noah took a deep breath, trying to contain the storm that was forming. "Ham, you need to understand that there are methods that work," said Noah, irritation showing in his voice. "We listen to everyone's ideas, but that doesn't mean you can disregard the experience we have." Ham's gaze hardened, and a flame of defiance lit in his chest. "Maybe you're forgetting that I'm part of this family too, and my ideas have value." The atmosphere became tense again, and Shem decided to intervene. "Ham, that's not what we're saying. We want to hear from you, but we need to be sensible." Ham crossed his arms, feeling increasingly isolated. Frustration consumed him, and he couldn't see the solution. After dinner, Noah isolated himself in his tent, reflecting on Ham's words. Where did everything go wrong? He asked himself, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He remembered the days of joy and togetherness, but now everything seemed to fall apart. The love he felt for his children was mixed with concern about how to guide them on the right path. In the dead of night, Noah fell asleep, but the echoes of Ham's words haunted him in restless dreams. What could have been a moment of unity and understanding was turning into a battlefield. The fight for respect and recognition within the family began to take shape, and Noah's vulnerability became a reflection of the human frailties that everyone faced. The story was just beginning to unfold, but the dilemma was already clear. How far would each of them be willing to go to protect what they considered important? The next morning began with an overcast sky, dark clouds forming on the horizon, as if the weather reflected the family's emotional state. Noah woke up earlier than usual, his worries weighing on him like a storm about to break. Ham's words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed as a father and leader. As he walked through the orchard, Noah watched his children work. Shem and Japheth were focused on their tasks, but Ham's gaze remained distant, as if he were in another world. "Why don't you join us, Ham?" Shem asked, trying to break the ice. "We're just taking care of the trees. It's a job we should all do." But Ham just shook his head, his silence resounding louder than any words. Noah's frustration grew as he saw the division between his sons deepen. He remembered simpler times when the family worked together and everyone respected the other's place. What happened to our unity? He reflected, feeling helpless in the face of the abyss that was forming between them. That day, a storm wasn't just a possibility in the sky. It was a reality that was quickly approaching. The heavy clouds began to dump torrential rain, and the ground, still newly cultivated, would soon become a quagmire. Noah, worried about the possibility of losing what he had planted, decided it was time to gather his family and take action. "We need to work together to protect our vineyards and what we have," he announced, his voice echoing through the sound of the rain. Shem and Japheth immediately mobilized, but Ham hesitated. "Why should we follow your orders, Father? You don't care what we think," he shouted, anger brimming in his words. Ham's defiance took Noah by surprise, and his father felt his frustration turn to indignation. "It's not about orders, it's about survival," he replied, trying to remain calm, but each word felt like another blow. The rain intensified, and the situation began to become critical. Noah knew he needed to act quickly. "If we don't come together now, we could lose everything. Think of everything we've worked for." The urgency in his voice seemed to have no effect on Ham, who refused to yield. "I'm not a puppet, Dad. I have ideas, and you never listen to me," he shouted, his face red with anger and frustration. The atmosphere was charged both outside and inside Noah's heart. He felt the pressure building, as if the storm was about to break not only over the earth, but also over his family. "Ham, please, this is not the time," begged Noah, but his son was unyielding. Noah then decided that if Ham didn't want to cooperate, he would have to move on. He called Shem and Japheth, and together they began to work in the vineyards, trying to protect what they could from the force of nature. The rain fell in torrents, and mud accumulated beneath their feet, but they continued to dig and put up makeshift protections. The sound of the water lapping against the ground and the wind howling around him were like a reflection of the emotional turmoil that gripped Noah. As they worked, Noah couldn't help but notice Ham's absence. The boy was outside in the storm, but his resistance seemed more like an emotional barrier than a physical one. "What can I do to bring him back?" Noah thought, anguished. He felt caught between the duty to protect his family and the pain of seeing his son slip away. Hours passed, and the storm finally began to subside. Noah and his sons managed to protect most of the vineyards, but the emotional cost of the day was high. Ham, still silent, walked away, and Noah's frustration turned to despair. "What else can I do?" he reflected as he looked at the now clear sky, but still carrying the memory of chaos. That night, as the family gathered again for an impromptu dinner, the tension was palpable. "Why didn't you join us, Ham?" asked Japheth, trying to lighten the mood. But Ham didn't respond. Noah watched each of his sons, sensing that much more was at stake than just the harvest. It was the very essence of their family. And he realized that, first of all, he needed to understand what was going on in the heart of Ham, because the divisions that were forming there could be more destructive than any approaching storm. As the family gathered around the table, the silence became deafening. Noah watched Ham, the expression of discontent etched on his face, and he felt a mixture of frustration and sadness. "How could I let it get to this point?" he thought, struggling to find the right words that could reach his son. The emotional pressure enveloped him like a storm about to break again. Ham stared at his plate, his thoughts visibly far from the meal before him. The young man was in an internal conflict, anger and hurt fighting for space in his heart. "My father doesn't understand how I feel. He never cares about my ideas." Indignation consumed him, but at the same time, the image of his brothers united alongside their father made him hesitate. Ham knew his resistance was taking him away from his family, but the pain of feeling ignored was stronger. Noah, in turn, felt a growing pressure in his chest. He needed to act before the rift between them became irreparable. "I must be a better father," he thought, as his gaze was lost at the window. The night was quiet now, but he knew the real storm was yet to come, and it wasn't rain. It's the future of our family that's at stake. He decided he needed to open his heart, even if it meant exposing his own vulnerabilities. "Listen," Noah began, his voice shaking with the intensity of his emotions. "I know things aren't good between us. Ham, I feel like you're distant, and it hurts me. I want to understand what you're going through." He hesitated, the words heavy in his throat. "Please tell me how I can help." Ham looked up, surprised. The father, always so firm and determined, now seemed fragile. Noah was clearly struggling with his own uncertainties. "He's not just the leader of our family. He's a human being who cares," Ham thought, feeling a pang of guilt for his resistance. Anger still burned inside him, but Noah's vulnerability was beginning to shake his defenses. "You never listen to me when I talk about my plans, Dad. It's always your way or nothing. How do you expect me to feel like I'm a part of this?" Ham finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. The words cut like blades, and Noah felt each one of them. But at the same time, he realized that it was a step towards the dialogue he so desired. "I didn't know you felt that way," Noah replied, the sincerity in his words a light amidst the darkness. "I just wanted to protect you and our family, but maybe I got lost in that role. I want to hear your ideas, Ham. I want you to feel part of it." Shem and Japheth exchanged glances, realizing that they were facing a crucial moment. The tension in the room seemed palpable, and each of the children felt the weight of their father's words. "It's time to make decisions that could change everything," thought Sem, anxious that the conversation not get lost in more disputes. "Noah, I admire what you've done for us, but we need more than just protection. We need a space where we can grow and share our visions," Japheth said, his voice calm but firm. "If we are not a team, we will always be divided." Listening to the brothers, Ham felt a new spirit. It was as if the storm within was beginning to calm down. "What if we do this together? What happens if we each bring our ideas to the table and work together as a family?" he suggested, uncertainty still hanging over his proposal. Noah felt relieved, as if a thick cloud had lifted. "Yes, let's do this. I want to hear from each of you. Let's plan together, with everyone contributing. I don't want you to feel absent, Ham. You are a fundamental part of this family." A new determination emerged between them, and the atmosphere began to change. The wounds were still there, but for the first time in a long time, there was an opening for healing. What once seemed like an abyss now looked like a bridge under construction. Noah knew that the path would be difficult and that there would be more storms ahead, but he was willing to face all of this together with his family. And so, as they looked at each other, a new understanding began to blossom between them. The storm had passed, but now it was time to prepare for what came next, with the hope that, together, they could overcome not only the challenges that nature imposed on them, but also the barriers they had built between themselves. The air in the room was almost electric, charged with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. As Noah tried to assimilate Ham and Japheth's words, he felt a wave of determination rising within him. He knew that this was the decisive moment, a turning point that could define the family's future. He looked at his children, their faces reflecting a mixture of hopes and fears, and decided he could not hesitate. "Ham, Japheth, Shem, I want you to know that I am ready to change. I'm ready to hear from you, but this requires courage from all of us. We need to be honest and open, even if it means facing hard truths," said Noah, his voice firm but full of emotion. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but also the lightness of a new beginning. Ham, who until then had remained in the shadow of anger, felt his resolve solidify. "If you really want to listen, Dad, then we need to be honest. I'm not a child anymore. I want to explore the world, have my experiences. I can't live in the shadow of what you expect of me," he said, his voice stronger now, as if he was finally freeing himself from a burden. "And I want you to explore, Ham, but I also want you to know that I'm here to guide you, not control you. Life is difficult and full of uncertainty. I don't want you to face this alone, Noah responded, feeling vulnerable but determined. He could feel the tension slowly dissipating, but Ham's internal struggle was still far from resolved. Jafe stood up, taking the lead in the conversation. It seems like everyone is carrying their own truths. What we need is a safe space to share this. We cannot fight among ourselves. We have to be a team. If not, we will always be divided amidst the storm. Jafe's words echoed in the room, like a call to action. A team, yes. We need a plan, something that includes all of us. Ham, what are your ideas? How can we build this together? Noah was now in an active mode, willing to open the door to a new era of dialogue and collaboration. He looked into Ham's eyes, hoping to see a sign that his son was ready to take that step. Ham hesitated, but the sincerity in his father's eyes gave him the necessary courage. I've been thinking about how we can work together to improve our home and the way we face the world outside. We can establish a space where everyone can contribute like a family council. That way, the decisions won't just be yours, Dad. They will be ours. Noah smiled, feeling a wave of relief. That's amazing, Ham. Some family advice. We can meet weekly, discuss ideas, challenges, and solutions. What do you think, Shem, Japheth? Sem nodded enthusiastically. I love the idea. And we can include our visions about what we want for the future. Not just protection, but growth and learning. The energy in the room was beginning to shift, and the tension of the conflict was slowly turning into something more productive. But as if life wanted to test this new dynamic, a sudden bang came from outside. The storm that Noah had feared for a long time finally arrived, with lightning and thunder that cut across the sky. The house shook, and the lights began to flicker. The atmosphere of reconciliation was abruptly interrupted, and concern once again took over the family. We need to act. The floods could reach here, Noah exclaimed, adrenaline surging through his body. He stood up, looking at his children. Let's go together. We need to protect the house and prepare for what comes. We cannot allow this to divide us again. Ham, Japheth, and Shem did not hesitate. They stood up, fear turning into a sense of urgency. The family, now united by a new purpose, began to move quickly. Together, they went to the windows, closing them and making sure there were no gaps through which the water could enter. As they worked, Noah felt a transformation within himself. He was no longer just fighting the external storm. He was also facing the internal storms that had threatened the family's unity. He turned to Ham, who was standing next to him, and said, "We're in this together, son. We will always be together." Ham smiled, a genuine smile that not only expressed relief but also renewed hope. "Yes, Father." Together, while the storm raged outside, the family was united inside, facing the challenge as one. The fight was not only against nature, but also against the barriers that had risen between them. And in that moment, Noah knew that no matter what happened next, they had made the right decision. They were ready to weather any storm together. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, the energy began to shift. Noah felt adrenaline pumping through his veins as he and his children finished closing the windows. The sound of the rain hitting the glass was deafening, but there was something comforting in that union, in the strength they found amidst the chaos. "We did it," said Jafe, panting, as he walked away from the last window. He looked at his brothers and father, his face illuminated by the determination that had emerged in the midst of the crisis. "Now what do we do?" Noah took a deep breath, trying to calm his own heart, which was still beating fast. "We need to make sure we have everything we need to weather the storm. Let's gather supplies and lanterns. If the power goes out, we need to be prepared." Ham nodded, his eyes shining with a new sense of purpose. The boy seemed to have freed himself from some of the weight that oppressed him. "I'll get the flashlights and batteries. Sem, can you help us gather food from the kitchen?" "Of course," Sem responded, running towards the kitchen, her infectious excitement bringing a bit of levity to the tense atmosphere. Noah watched his children, a mixture of pride and relief filling his heart. He realized that even in the midst of a literal storm, there was an internal storm that was beginning to calm down. That moment of unity, despite the fear, began to show the first signs of a new reality. And in some ways, the storm had been a blessing in disguise. As he moved through the house, Noah reflected on his actions thus far. He had always intended to protect his family, but he now realized that protection came not just from control, but from mutual trust. He wondered how it had taken him so long to understand this. Family life was a dance, and he was finally learning to let his children dance alongside him. Minutes passed, and despite the fear that the storm brought, the family seemed more united than ever. Japheth helped Noah gather towels and blankets, while Ham and Shem organized the lanterns. There was nervous laughter, words of encouragement, and a sense that no matter what happened outside, they would be together. "Dad, do you think we can do it?" Ham asked, his voice a little hesitant, but with a glimmer of hope. "Of course, son. Look at us. We are working together, and that is the most important thing," replied Noah, feeling that those words were true now more than ever. The storm continued to rage, but the worry that had previously hung over the house began to dissipate, replaced by a feeling of camaraderie. They were ready to face whatever came. When the light went out and the house was plunged into darkness, Noah immediately turned on one of the lanterns. The soft light illuminated the faces of their children, reflecting the determination that united them. They sat in a circle on the floor, surrounded by supplies and blankets, and little by little, the tension gave way to deeper conversations. "Let's make this a ritual," suggested Japh. "A time to come together, not just now, but whenever things get difficult. A space where we can be honest and open. Yes, a safe space," Sem added, her enthusiasm unwavering. "We can support each other and listen to each other." The idea of a family ritual, a space to discuss dreams and challenges, took shape before them. Those conversations that always seemed to be delayed by routine have now become a priority. The children looked at Noah, and he felt that they were ready to build something new together, a solid foundation for what would come in the future. The roar of the storm outside was no longer a sign of fear, but a reminder that even the darkest moments could bring out the light of unity. As the rain fell and the winds blew, Noah realized that the real storm was within them, and that by facing it together, they were creating a new beginning, a new story. The house might shake, but the family was stronger than ever. As the storm raged outside, Noah felt an inner calm that contrasted with the chaos of nature. He looked at his children, each immersed in their tasks, and the certainty that they were ready for any adversity filled him with gratitude. The storm, which had previously seemed to be the greatest of their concerns, was now turning into an opportunity for growth and unity. As the night progressed, the first waters began to accumulate. Noah knew that the time for his mission was near. He remembered the instructions given by God, the order to build the ark and gather the animals, an act of faith and obedience that had taken years to come to fruition. Now, as he sat there with his children, he realized that the coming storm was much more than a meteorological phenomenon. It was a test of faith, a proof of divine justice. When the rain began to flood the earth, Noah and his family headed for the ark, taking the food and animals with them. Every step they took towards that colossal structure was a reminder of the greater purpose that united them. Noah looked at his sons, and within him grew the certainty that their obedience to God's call was not just a matter of physical survival, but a step towards redemption and the renewal of creation. The rain continued to fall, and the waters began to cover the land. Noah remembered the words of God, who told him that he would establish a covenant with him and his children. Divine justice was not only manifested in the destruction of the wicked, but also in the protection of the righteous. Noah, realizing that the storm was a symbol of purification, a way for God to restore the creation that had become corrupted. As the waters rose, he reflected on how disobedience and corruption had brought the world to this point. The story of Noah was a story of faith, but also of responsibility. He had chosen to listen to God's voice and act according to the instructions he received. And in response to this faith, he found himself surrounded by his blessings and divine protection. Inside the ark, Noah felt a peace that defied the storm outside. Their children, now together and closer than ever, represented the continuity of God's promise. Through them, humanity would have a new chance. Noah understood that, just as rain washed the earth, God's mercy also offered new life, a fresh start. Over time, the waters eventually began to recede. The ark rested on Mount Ararat, and Noah's family finally emerged into a renewed world. He looked up at the sky, where the clouds were dissipating, and saw the rainbow emerging as a sign of God's covenant with humanity. The sight of that beauty was a reminder that even in the midst of judgment, God does not forget his mercy. The lesson that Noah learned, and that he wanted to pass on to his children, was clear. Obedience to God brings blessings, even in times of great difficulty. Faith is not only a refuge in times of storm, but also the light that guides the steps towards the future. And so Noah's story would become a legacy of hope, a testimony of divine justice and mercy, and a reminder that even in the fiercest storms, unity and faith can bring true salvation. As I reflected on everything that had happened, a deep realization came over me. The storm that once seemed like the greatest threat of our lives has transformed into a powerful symbol of renewal and hope. Every drop of rain, every wave that crashed against the ark, was a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, God's presence never leaves us. The obedience I chose to practice was not just a matter of survival. She became the anchor of my faith and the light that illuminated the path for my family. The story of our journey is not just about a flood and an ark, but about a deep and intimate relationship with God. Through my actions, I learned that true faith is often tested in the storms of life. It's not just about believing that God exists, but about having the courage to act according to his will, even when the world around us seems to be falling apart. The covenant God made with me and my children was not just a promise of protection. It was a call to be instruments of his grace and mercy on earth. What I experienced can be applied to the lives of all of us. In times of crisis, it is easy to lose hope and give into despair. However, history teaches us that faith and obedience are the keys that open the doors to salvation and renewal. If we remain firm, confident in the goodness of God, even the fiercest storms can be transformed into opportunities for growth and closer contact with the Creator. The memory of the rainbow that appeared after the storm resonates in my heart, symbolizing the promise that, despite the difficulties, there will always be a new beginning. May we, like me, be willing to listen and act according to divine direction, even when it requires sacrifice. Our challenges are not barriers, but rather stepping stones toward the fullness of the purpose God has for us. As the narrator of this story, it is important to highlight that the journey of Noah and his family is a timeless testimony to the relationship between humanity and divinity. She teaches us that, in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, we can find security in faith. The story reminds us that we are not alone. God's promises extend to all of us, offering hope and renewal. So even when storms threaten to consume us, we can lift our eyes and our hearts, remembering that the light of faith shines even brighter in the darkness. May each of us seek this light, and may we be, in our lives, reflections of divine mercy, ready to face the storms with courage, unity, and unshakable faith.